Good morning, everybody. We are starting today in our lesson, John chapter 11. Today we will have Jesus come to Bethany at the request of Mary and Martha. And you know what he's going to do. He's going to raise the dead. But there's going to be a lot more than maybe some other miracles where he's done this. He's going to have some pushback and some teaching along the way that are very healthy and beneficial for our souls. And me talking about Lazarus sounds familiar. Yes, this was my Ash Wednesday text, and I'll preach it again tonight. So I feel like I've been hanging out with Lazarus all Lent. So that's a good thing. I digress. Let's read the text. Lazarus in John chapter 11, first section 1 to 32. And I'm okay splitting that up a little bit. Maybe someone take 1 to 16. Margaret will take 1 to 16. Adrian will take the back half. Okay, let's do it.
The death of Lazarus. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. But he doesn't tell that story until the next chapter.
Spoiler alert, right?
So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Yet when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. Then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews tried to stone you, and yet you are going back there?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? A man who walks by day will not stumble, for he sees by this world's light. It is when he walks by night that he stumbles, for he has no light." After he had said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get better." Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Then Thomas, called Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him."
When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles away. Many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, while Mary was sitting in the house. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha replied, "I know that he will rise in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will live, even if he dies. And whoever lives and believes in me will never perish. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she told him. "I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who was to come into the world." After she said this, Martha went back to call her sister Mary. She whispered, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet gone into the village, but was still where Martha met him. The Jews who were with Mary in the house consoling her saw that she got up quickly and left. So they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died."
All right. Verse 1 there, Bethany. Mary and Martha and Lazarus lived there. They were devout believers in Jesus, and Jesus had an especially close relationship with this family. Their home provided a base of operations for Jesus when he visited Jerusalem. All right. So, bedroom community, home of these 3 friends. I'll go through the questions here and then also entertain your questions. We have the question, when Jesus heard about Lazarus' sickness, he said this had happened so that God might be glorified. What did he mean by that? Wow.
And to fulfill the prophecies.
Okay. So, fulfill the prophecies of the miraculous signs Jesus would perform. Any other thoughts? Yeah. Wayne?
That God would be honored because Jesus already knows he's going to raise him from the dead, is able to raise him from the dead. And even if the unbelievers say, oh my God, that is their God.
So, I don't know, always interesting here, he didn't say that I would be glorified, but that God would be glorified. You know, Jesus is really going to impress now until his death that he's doing his Father's work and his Father sent him. Not that he hasn't done this before, but he really emphasizes this. If you think about his prayers and such. Now we're really seeing how Jesus is on this mission to do God's will, and this is going to be part of that. And I suppose at the moment it doesn't seem like, well, is this mission critical that Lazarus raises from the dead? I mean, didn't Jesus have other friends that died? But it's mission critical in the sense that now he's really going to show his power and also bring heat on himself, right? He's really gonna be doing this in the full face of the Pharisees who are going to get upset about it. Right? You either say I'm from God or you don't, and this is maybe you can ignore a blind person seeing, but you can't ignore a dead person that just rose from the grave. So, yeah, sure. Susan.
At least it's not Sally. The People's Bible uses the phrase that even the hand of death cannot stop the hand of God. And I like that.
Even the hand of death can stop the hand of God. Yeah. So, I mean, we're still talking about this miracle today. The disciples saw it. There's really no downside to anybody's faith here. God is definitely showing Jesus his glory through Jesus here. So, yeah. Question?
At this stage of the game, Lazarus was dead for 4 days already, so he had to have been smelling and decomposing already. Where the other mere times that Jesus healed someone who died, it was a very recent death.
Yeah, I'm thinking of I don't think we know how long the boy that was being carried out of the town had been dead. He might have been dead a few days. But here we get definitely the 4 days. And I may have pointed that in the sermon too, that the Jews believed that after 4 days the soul was gone. So they believed that when you died, your soul kind of hovered with your body. It might be kind of in a ghost-like way around, but after 3 days, that ended. You were no longer there. And again, that's not a biblical teaching. That was just kind of the rabbis' imaginations and something that they taught. But there's definitely a point here where 4 days is a long time to be decomposing and really, really dead.
It doesn't, not really to this question, but it's sort of peripheral to that. And when people say, oh, live and die, that's just normal, it's not. God did not intend us to die. The devil brought sin in, the sin brought death.
Yeah, we do need to kick back against that thought that, well, death is a natural thing.
It's completely unnatural.
Exactly. It's completely unnatural. Just because it happens all the time to everyone doesn't mean that that is good or normal. And but the world is filled with that, right? It's filled with that teaching that, well, you shouldn't fear death because or you shouldn't have to, it's what's supposed to happen, right? You evolve from dust and you'll return to dust. That's nature. And you say, no, that's not. Biblically, the truth is, no, that's not how God made us to die. He didn't make us to die. At this point in Jesus' life, number 2, what did it mean for him to walk in the day? I don't know. I go back and forth on this. I mean, I'm looking at my study Bible notes. I don't know if I like the answer it gives there. Give me a good answer. What is Jesus talking about there? Yeah, Beth?
I think he said he could see where he was going because he knew what was going to happen. So he could see, and the people that didn't believe did not know. The reason he was going to Jerusalem was he was going to die. And then if we walk in the light, we follow Jesus.
I like that as one interpretation, and to say disciples are concerned Jesus is going to get stoned, right? This is not a good idea to go to Jerusalem and get this close and go see Lazarus. But Jesus says, I know where I'm going. I'm not doing anything wrong, right? I'll be fine. So is Jesus here pointing to the fact that he's not going to, when he says I'm not going to stumble, I'm going to keep obeying God's will for me. But if he doesn't go to Jerusalem, if he doesn't start this path to the cross, then he's walking in darkness, right? He's letting the fear of the world affect him. So, yeah, what did my notes say here? Verse 9. 12 hours, enough time for what must be done, but no time for waste. I don't think this was a comment about when the right time to travel was, where the sun was. I think it was just traveling with God's intentions in mind, and kind of along those lines of, when do people sin? And the Bible makes a comment about that people will do it at night, right? When no one can see it. The Bible's definitely not saying people don't sin in the daytime. People rob banks in the daytime and they rob banks in the night. But what is going on here? Are you following God? That's walking in the light. If you're not following God, if you're not trusting him, then you're stumbling in the darkness. I think that's Jesus' main point. Jesus was not concerned too much about robbers or hard to walk at night. I mean, it was, yeah. We will grant him that. Yeah, sure.
It seems like John wrote the gospel, seems to pick up on those themes of light with Jesus, going back to John 1. So maybe that's something he heard and just wanted to share in different ways, this light and darkness feature.
Yeah, that's a great point too. John does many times talk about light and darkness as a symbol of good and evil, or right and wrong. And we shouldn't say John picks it up, but John shares that teaching. Well, an earlier occasion, Mary had shown great trust in the Lord when she sat at Jesus' feet and listened to him, while Martha had been distracted while serving. This time, however, the tables were turned. How did Martha's faith shine? Joe?
Well, the first thing she thought of was, let's go to Jesus.
All right. I would say Mary wanted to go to Jesus too. I don't think it was just Martha saying, let's call for Jesus. But maybe you're talking about when he physically got there, maybe? So when he physically got there, Martha came out, right? And Mary didn't.
Well, it says she met him on the way.
Yeah.
So she knew where he was, and she was on her way to make sure he was coming.
Right, so it sounds like
Mary probably was a little more emotional and probably was at home mourning.
mourning, or even, could we even say she was upset?
Yeah.
Yeah. So verse 31, when the Jews who had been with Mary in the house accompanying her noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her. So she does go later, and I've always kind of interpreted that as she was disappointed in Jesus for not coming, right? I think Martha kind of represents both of them and says, we would have liked to hear before he died. And so I've always kind of interpreted that as, Mary's pretty upset. But yeah, another thought?
In the People's Bible thing, it says that they had a standard or common 7 days of mourning, and that people came and joined them for these mourning periods, and they often went to the gravesite to share their mourning and their weeping. It also mentioned that Martha went without maybe telling Mary.
That's a possibility.
When Mary heard about it, Martha came back and she heard about it. She also went quickly. But Martha's statement was both a clear identification of Jesus, that he was the Son of God, and that she had faith and trust in him. She was very clear about that.
Yeah. So I love this in the standpoint of Martha, who was distracted and worried about many things, now is kind of a star pupil, right? I mean, what had she picked up from Jesus's feet, or what had she learned after, Jesus's rebuke of her? Eternal life and the resurrection of the dead. So, Nicole?
So this is,
Denise.
it's okay, I get it all the time.
I'm just gonna mix up everybody's name today, just.
Well, I am Denise Nicole, so it works.
Okay.
So this is where, sarcasm and anger and stuff doesn't come through in a text. Martha says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died, but I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. So she puts the qualifier in there, she puts the but in there. She followed up on her demand or her request or her accusation. Mary says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died, period. So it's the same sentence, it's the same accusation, it's the same, but we don't have the context, we don't have the vocals, we don't have the meaning behind, was Martha accusing Jesus, or was she just stating it? And then she also said, but I know God will do whatever you ask. And where Mary was, maybe Mary was more accusatory. how could you let this happen? Maybe more angry. So Martha was showing her faith more and going to Jesus and saying, but I know God will do whatever you ask him to do.
So I mean, this boils down to the question here: is Martha asking for Jesus to raise Lazarus from the grave, or is she asking for something else? I mean, I guess that's kind of the question I always come back to when I read this text.
I don't think she's asking him at this point to raise him, just that Jesus is going to help comfort and give him guidance and stuff at this point.
Yeah, I think she's, I mean, we have Jesus changing water into wine and his mom's request. You go back and forth. Is she asking for a miracle or not? And I think at some point you say Mary was asking Jesus to take care of it, and she knew he would, miracle or not. And I think here, Mary and Martha know Jesus has raised the dead before. I don't think they're oblivious to the fact he can do it, but at 4 days out, and Jesus could have come earlier, she's probably thinking, Jesus, you talked a lot about the resurrection at the last day, and that's what I'm really looking forward to now, right? I tend to go that direction. Think she is not expecting to go to the tomb after this request. But she's thinking heavenly and eternal. So I got my answer on the healing here on earth. Now God's will is that something eternal is going to happen, and that's going to be good. So, yeah. Well, what does Jesus mean when he says in verse 25, I am the resurrection and the life? Naomi?
Only because of him we will rise and have eternal life. He is the only way.
All right, so again, your brother is not God, is he? Even though people will live even though they die, right? That's the good juxtaposition of physical death is one thing, but physical death is not eternal death. Physical death does not mean your soul is gone. And how important that is for us to know. And I think Vicar did a good job in his sermon recently where he said, we're not animals. God gave us bodies and soul. And you can't touch your soul, so to speak. It lives on. Even though our bodies show our age or our health, our soul doesn't get old and expire. And of course, one day our bodies will not be old and expire. So, as we talked about earlier, death is not natural, and it will not happen again after the first death here on earth. So, Wayne, question?
I don't know if there's an English term for something where an inanimate thing is given human qualities. Here, I think that's what it is.
Personification.
The resurrection is an inanimate thing. Without Jesus, there is no resurrection. It's saying like, he is light. Without Jesus, there is no light. That is no eternal light, and there is no life that is not real life. You are alive, but sort of zombie-like because you have an end that ends in darkness. So it's that type of thing. I believe that's mixed in with this. And I think of the previous one where she said, Lord, if you were here, he would not have died. Meaning, you healed so many others before they died. You probably would have done that. But I know now you could even heal him and bring him to life again if you wanted, because God does all things you wish. Okay. But I don't think she specifically even said, you will do that now.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a great example of, you know, God's will be done, isn't it? I mean, she knows God's will is that even though we die, we will live forever. And that's a very mature prayer, right? I mean, when someone's sick and we know that their end is coming, we still have hope at the end of that prayer and for the future. So, yeah, I guess I hear that, you know, it's almost like your will be done, and you know, if you were here and you would have healed him, fine. I get it. Again, the tonation we don't have the look on her face, but I don't know. In my mind, I don't see her scowling. Like, if you would have been here, you wouldn't have died. I don't see that, right? Doesn't, not with the next thing she says. With the next thing she says, I see a humble, submissive faith there, and I like how Jesus. And you notice what Jesus kind of does. Before he raises Lazarus, he wants to see her faith, right? You know, it's not like, I don't know, you give someone a gift and they don't appreciate where it came from, right? Jesus, she has a faith that's mature, and he is blessing that faith now by bringing her brother back. She's not pouting. It's not like, well, Lord, I would believe in you if you do a miracle. And that's what Jesus wants to bless, right? He wants to bless people that trust in him, and but if people are testing him or wavering, that's not the time he does miracles. So, Susan?
A previous Bible study that I had, I've got a notation in here that they made in this section, and refers back to I am. He is the great I am, the Yahweh, the God. And it's ongoing action, and it never stops.
Yeah, I am who I am. Yeah, so it's one of the I am statements. That's question 4 there, actually. So what does Jesus mean when he says, in verse 25, I am the resurrection and the life? He is God. He is the great I am. He's eternal. And he has the authority he's going to live forever, and he has the authority to give people life. So, yeah. Different than all the other prophets that did miracles. I mean, Elijah and Elisha never said, I am the resurrection and the life, you know, and then they healed someone. No, but Jesus did. So, claiming to be God, Jesus is here. So the word, one of the names for God is I am. And it's a hard word in Hebrew to pronounce. You can't really pronounce it. The Jews don't pronounce it. They say Adonai. And so when you say I am, that harkens right back to Genesis and how God refers to himself. So it almost be like if I sign things Pontus, right? President of the United States. Everybody kind of knows what Pontus is from the office of the Pontus. Well, if God had a Pontus signature, it would be I am. Signed by Jesus. _ I am. So you have to think here too. This is those I am statements are not small or something to gloss over. Just as if I started to sign things like I was the President of the United States. You either say you're right or you're nuts, right? You're not the president. And that's kind of where Jesus is going, right? People are going to say you're right, but people are going to say, no, you're nuts. So hopefully after seeing Lazarus come out of his grave, people say you're right and give God the glory. So, and again, if they give Jesus glory, they give the Father glory, don't they? So we can put those two right together quickly. So, wait.
When Jesus said to the Pharisees, before Abraham was, I am, that's when they hit the roof. Because they knew he said, claiming to be God.
Yeah.
Equal with God. Even if it wasn't God, equal with God at least.
Yeah.
Which is the same thing.
So, yeah, that was an eternal statement. I was before Abraham. How can you say that? You're not even 50 years old. I am the way, the truth, and the life. What is truth? How can you say that? I am the resurrection and the life.
And then before Pilate, didn't they say that, or before they went to Pilate, who do you say you have? He said, I told you. Now what don't you get? Remember when I said I am? You didn't want to know.
So, already in verse 4, let's apply it. Of our reading, Jesus knew that he was going to bring Lazarus back from the dead. If Mary and Martha had known, they wouldn't have had to go through all the headache. Why does God sometimes make us wait before he blesses us? Why is he making them wait?
Sometimes to test our faith, like you check the strength of a rope or a lock or something. Sometimes to give us a chance to demonstrate our faith to those around us. But he comes as the fulfillment of all of that.
So faith as a muscle is being exercised here. It's being strained, but it's only going to get stronger as the Lord will do this miracle. Our faith is tested, but makes us, right, perseverance and hardship makes us stronger and more content in the Lord. Gives us hope.
Plus we as humans want our answers now. We don't want to wait 4 days.
So yeah, the patience involved. I've heard the saying recently, good times make weak men, and weak men make bad times, and bad times make strong men, and strong men make good times, and good times make weak men, and weak men make bad times. You know, it's like this circle. But it's true with faith too. Bad times make strong Christians. And maybe it happens in our lives too. Good times make us weaker, but difficult times make us stronger. So, the best thing that happened for the Christian church was it was persecuted. What? How could you say that? Well, people don't fight for their faith, they lose it, right? And sometimes God puts it right in our face. We have to fight for it. Maybe that's all the stress we have in society and all the wickedness right now. Maybe God wants us to grow in our faith before the end comes. In fact, I know that's His will. So, how are these things that are stressing you and such going to make you stronger? Because that's ultimately God's will. We can talk about that all day, couldn't we? I suppose. But we'll do number 6. Jesus said that Lazarus was asleep. Many unbelievers use the same terminology today. Why do unbelievers sometimes call death sleep? Why did Jesus call death sleep? This is probably one of my favorite questions so far in our study. And I forget who alluded to this a moment ago, but, well, I think Wayne did when he said it was natural, right? But, yeah, Susan?
To me, death is just the bridge between here and heaven. Something we have to cross, but when we wake up, I mean, we've fallen asleep because of death, but when we wake up in heaven. So it's really not sleep. It's just a transition.
So believers call it a sleep as far as, is this a transition? It's temporary. I don't want to use the word natural because I just railed against natural, but it's the expected way we go to where we want to go, right? Nobody's so scared of falling asleep tonight, typically. And by faith, nobody's afraid of going to heaven, right, and leaving this world.
The idea is that it's something that ends. Sleep ends, and you wake up.
Okay, so on the aspect too that sleep is temporary, right? Life after death, eternal life in heaven is just like God waking us up in the morning and giving it to us. So, yeah, no thought, Joe?
Well, a lot of unbelievers try to minimize what death is, so because they don't want to face what it really is. And that's why they think all roads lead to heaven and stuff like that too. And they talk about people looking down on them who had nothing to do with religion their entire life, you know, and you know very well they're not looking down on you.
Yeah. In a strange way, I think about this at funerals when someone has an open casket and they do the makeup and put the person in a nice suit. I think on one hand, that's great, right? I mean, we want to see our loved one looking like we remembered them. But yet, for an unbeliever, I think, I don't know if this is so great, you know, because then it kind of makes it feel like, well, they're just sleeping here. I could almost wake them up, and it takes the sting of death away for an unbeliever sometimes. Not, we didn't see them. Many people didn't see the person dying in the hospital or suffer through the cancer. So they remember the person 5 years ago, and then they saw the person today in the casket, and they look the same. And then you can almost play a trick on your mind, saying they're okay, they're fine. I don't know. That's just me trying to get into the mind of others, but it's good for people not to see unmakeup, viewings, but it's good for people to really see someone going through the process of dying and think about it, because I think so much of the world is, trying to look at how nice the gravestone is, right, or how beautiful the cemetery is, or how good they looked in the casket, and they're kind of trying to sugarcoat something that they don't want to think about. I don't know. Anyone else think that way or have another thought? Wayne?
If you want to read an excellent article about a woman whose mother raised her with the idea that all roads lead to God and every church is the same, then read the article, and I think it's this month or just last month, either one, about page 8 or so, in Forward in Christ. This lady was raised by that, and they went to everything you can imagine: Buddhist temples, Muslim mosque, regular church, whatever. And now she's a believer in Christ. It's an unbelievable story, but I only mention it because of mention that people try to evade the truth or whatever. And here's someone how the Holy Spirit broke through that whole mess. Please read it if you get a chance. You'll be glad you did.
And where God put the miracle into things there is she had this thing in her mind that a true minister would be one that knew how to speak Hebrew and Greek.
Which happened to be our guys.
And she runs into this guy who just comes to her door to
and that her son, who was a little 8-year-old kid, had the TV on, and an evangelist on TV said, "You're a Christian, and you belong in Sunday school." And he went into his mother's bedroom when she was still in bed and said, "I'm a Christian." She hear the bell on the bed. And he wouldn't give it up. Please read it. You'll be glad you did.
The young pastor, Matt Vogt, that was mentioned in the story, was a classmate of my son's.
I'll continue on with verse 33. So, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. When the Jews said, "See how he loved him," but some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Jesus, once more, deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave cloths and let him go." Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did put their faith in him, but some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. "What are we accomplishing?" they asked. "Here is a man performing many miraculous signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our palace and our nation." Then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year, spoke up. "You know nothing at all. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than the whole nation perish." He did not say this on his own, but as high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation, and not only for the nation, but also for the scattered children of God, to bring them together and make them one, so that from that day on they plotted to take his life. Therefore Jesus no longer moved about publicly among the Jews. Instead, he withdrew to a region near the desert, to a village called Ephraim, where he stayed with his disciples. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, many went up from the country to Jerusalem for their ceremonial cleansing before the Passover. They kept looking for Jesus, and they stood in the temple area. They asked one another, "What do you think? Isn't he coming to the feast at all?" But the chief priests and Pharisees had given orders that if anyone found out where Jesus was, he should report it, so that they might arrest him. All right, so Jesus becomes a wanted man, maybe sowing the seeds of Judas's greed there, actually. Now that word is out, if you see Jesus, we want to have some words with him. Verse 51, the high priest, the position of high priest should have been passed down from father to son, but this time in Jewish history, however, the position was mostly political. It could be bought, sold, or awarded. Yet the Lord still honored the position and put his words into Caiaphas' mouth. So we'll talk about Caiaphas' words in just a moment. Question 1, Martha had expressed a strong faith, yet we see her faith severely tested. What command of Jesus did she object to? Susan?
The rolling away of the stone, because he had been in the grave for 4 days.
Okay. Maybe another hint that she didn't expect Jesus to raise Lazarus from the grave. We don't know if she bought into the whole thought of the soul leaving the body after 4 days, like the Jews had taught, but yeah. saying no to Jesus never works well, but she did it anyway. I guess, how patient is Jesus, right? Like, I'm going to raise your brother. No. Keep the stones. Jesus lovingly understands her struggle and works through us, even despite us sometimes. Yeah.
My question here has always been for a long time, how did Lazarus feel about all of this?
How did Lazarus feel? Yeah, you never.
You know, because what, I'm afraid to say this because we know, but if he was in heaven, why in the world would he ever, I mean, this is just perplexing to me, always has been.
You know, once you've been to heaven, I think you're probably on cloud 9 the rest of your life anyway, right? He's like, I'm going back. 6 feet of snow, I don't care.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought he was gonna come back totally as, without these thoughts.
So, okay, I will say we if there was a book to be written about heaven, I wish Lazarus would have written it. Second of all, does Lazarus get some sort of full heaven experience? We're not told, right? I mean, we don't believe Jesus, puts you in a corner of heaven by yourself or something, but he could have, right? God could have said, I'm going to send you back. Can you just wait? We're not going to have you, we're not going to show you your room quite just yet. I mean, God could have said that too, right? And I'm just trying to heavenly, spiritually speculate, but, maybe the point is not that Lazarus came back and told all these wonderful stories about how beautiful heaven was. Maybe Lazarus came back and just said, heaven's real. I know I didn't see it. I didn't see much of it, but I know I was dead and I'm back. Jesus is God. Hey, part of me wants to say Lazarus kept it really simple, and God probably kept it simple for Lazarus. Because who wants to be the guy that has all the answers about heaven? I don't. Gosh, you guys would pester me so much. I don't want to know everything about heaven. But, yeah, Wayne.
Well, and our goal in life is that our will coincides with God. So, if you're in heaven, your will does coincide with God. If God's will is you come back, you agree with that.
And the thing, too, is what is heaven today before Judgment Day and what's heaven after? We do know there's differences. And even heaven's going to change. So, again, I could tell you what Disneyland was like in 1975. But what value is that for 2023, right? I mean, at some point you'd say, heaven is going to be different. Who? Yeah. I mean, the angels are the angels singing as much, or are they busier down here on earth? Just things like that. Heaven's going to obviously be different. So anyway, yeah.
Well, also the differentness is that there's no time in heaven. That's eternity. It doesn't have time as we know it.
Yeah. The time in heaven conversation is fascinating, and let's go out for a beer. But yeah, yeah.
And you can get
For Lazarus, it might have felt like a blink of an eye. So.
And you get in line to ask him when you get there.
Yeah. And when you get to heaven, you won't care what Lazarus saw in heaven, probably. You'll just want to meet Lazarus. But definitely he becomes the coolest dude in Bethany, right? I mean, everybody wants to see Lazarus. And part of that might be because Jesus is hiding, right? Jesus is not trying to be found too much more here. Okay, second question. Again, we see Jesus' unity with the Father. Jesus knew the Father would allow him to perform this miracle, yet he made his request so everyone could hear it. Why?
To to emphasize his relationship with the Father audibly in front of these people, and also to show that he assumed, he expressed his authority over death.
Yeah, so we see Jesus doing things now where he is, God showing his approval very verbally. Like when, so Jesus could heal someone earlier and say, I can only do it because my Father gives me the ability. But now he's like openly asking God, and then he's doing it. So it's a different level of public approval of God over Jesus. And then isn't that fitting, because later he's going to say on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? And it's night and day, right? So God has been with Jesus and blessed him because he is the Messiah. But now as the sacrifice, he's completely abandoned by God. Sort of like that perfect lamb in your flock is the one that you look at every day and you make sure it's getting enough water, and you're like, this is the best lamb. And then you take the lamb and you kill it, and then the priest eats it. You totally turn your back on that lamb. And you kind of see that with Jesus and these miracles and his death. He's dearly loved. God is so invested in him. But then for our sins, he's totally rejected. Jesus prays to God, and God is not listening. Okay? My God, why have you forsaken me? Is the prayer. Did God hear that prayer? Essentially, no. Right? God is left. So. 3, what was the result of this miracle? People's faith got stronger. Some people's anger got stronger too. So you can see the Pharisees say, we can tell these blind people liars that they can now see, but man, we're really struggling with how we can put Lazarus back in the tomb. They can't do it. For the Jews sped up their plans to kill Jesus after Lazarus. Why?
They didn't want the Romans to show up.
All right, so there's political fear here, definitely.
I think they were afraid of losing their own power.
Yeah.
Their power would be crushed by the Romans, and this goes back a ways, where the best way to handle the Jews are to give them their little plot of land in Israel and tell them to pay taxes. I mean, if you try to do much more than that, there's usually a war and it's bloody and things don't change. But if Jesus starts poking the Romans, if the Romans start smelling revolt or new leadership, then they might change their mind. They might take away the Jews' authority and rule. Also, why did this speed up their plans? Well, because this is hardening their hearts even more, right? Their unbelief is, if we would say our faith can get stronger, can we also agree that our unbelief could get stronger? I think we can agree that people's unbelief can get stronger. We talk about Satan working in somebody's heart and then getting a hold of them, and yeah. So their unbelief is getting harder. They're stronger. Yeah. So along those lines, explain what Caiaphas meant by the statement in verse 50. Spare. I got it on 2 pages here. So you know nothing at all. You do not realize it is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish. Caiaphas is kind of saying, well, you're saying it. Don't you realize what you're saying? You're saying he's got to die. Yeah, he's got to be stopped. But he also, earlier that year, we're told, said that Jesus would die for the nation, for the scattered children of Israel. So his sinful nature is saying, let's get rid of him. But his office, God through his office is saying, this guy, Jesus, his death will bring together the nation. Right? So he's thinking politically. He's thinking, we'll get everybody back on board with our rule if we get rid of Jesus, our competition. But God is saying through him, we will have a nation of believers, right? We will have God's children will have their sins forgiven and unite around him. So again, the thought of Israel transitioning from a genetic group of people descended from Abraham to Israel being a group of people that are gathered around Christ in faith is highlighted here, and it's the point. But people still confuse that today, right? They still confuse nation of Israel with how God has transitioned our interpretation of that to children of God, believers. 6, Jesus knew he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead, yet when he approached the grave, he wept. What application does that have for our conduct and our attitudes at funerals of God's people? It's a good question, too. Come on, Jesus, why did you cry? You know you're going to raise him. Yeah.
I think this was a clear demonstration that tears of grief, tears of sympathy have definitely a place in our grieving. It's not grieving without hope, but the sympathy and the emotions are there. Even Jesus wept.
God made you an emotional being too, right? So it's not a sin to tap your toe during a hymn at church. It's not a sin to cry when you sing at a funeral, right? We are, like Jesus, human, truly human, and we're affected by sin.
It's his caring.
It is caring, yeah. Jesus' dad has died by this time. Undoubtedly Jesus cried at the grave of his father, too, right? Yeah. But he didn't grieve as if he didn't have hope, right? And that's what we know about heaven too. He'll wipe away all the tears from our eyes. Probably wiped away quite a few tears that day too. All right, as promised, Lazarus died and was buried and rose again. Any last thoughts or comments? Let us close with the doxology.
Praise God from whom all blessings flow.